Excessive Rainfall Outlook and the co-lead for the, I might mess this up, Quantitative Precipitation Forecast. That's because I'm Southern. I got certain words I have problems pronouncing. People at work at my office don't talk about it. So did I get that one right?
Sounded good.
Okay, good. He has worked many flash flood events. He's been in North Dakota. He was Goodland, went to Norman, Oklahoma, then WPC. And he was the chapter president of this chapter from 2004 to 2005. Everybody please welcome Patrick.
All right, I appreciate it. You know, I got the first email from Brian back in February or so. I think my first reaction was like, wow, that is cool. And I forwarded it to Dave Novak, our director at WPC. I said, look at this cool opportunity to come back and speak at one of my former offices. And he agreed with me, but what he didn't know is I wasn't asking. I would have found a way to get here. Because no, I really appreciated being invited back and enjoy being back in the area. So I hope to, I'm always torn when I go and speak how much time I spend on just educating everyone as to what the heck WPC is and what we do, which is a lot. But then trying also to spin towards the future and how this collaboration effort has evolved, and I know collaboration is one of the themes here today. I'm getting the idea that also color is a theme. Yeah, I'll try to split my time between those two things and leave a little bit at the end for questions. What I'll do at first is just kind of give you an overview of what we do, and hopefully, you know, those of you in the Weather Service especially, you have some familiarity with us by this point in time. Particularly our big three, we call them, the three programs that really lead WPC in terms of our products. We've got our heavy rainfall and UPF desks, the winter weather desk, which is a little more recent development since about 2002, 2004, kind of in that era. Actually, when I was at Goodland, they were spinning up the first winter calls. And then our medium range desk, which has incorporated some other parts, things from CPC now. So that's our three main programs that really drives a lot of the thinking. But the mission at WPC is really even broader than that, and I'll show you why. But I always like to give a sense of just who we are, and you know, that relationship building and face-to-face time, you know, that we need. Try to give you a little sense of that. And so I was like plotting up and keeping current this map of either places where our forecasters have lived or have worked, have the stars up there. And so it's, you know, there might be a perception of kind of an East Coast bias, and we do have a lot more Penn State grads than I really care to work with sometimes. But we do have a pretty diverse background, especially including a lot of central region. Where we're really lacking is out in the west, as became evident as I was putting this together. But we have 33 forecasters. We've got a couple of promotions or additions to our GS14 leads. So everything's kind of a step up from what it would be sort of pay grade from a WFO. So our leads are 14s. We have a SUE and a whole development and training branch. So there's two branches to WPC. And we just added brand new a warning coordinator, Alex Lamers, who kind of grew up with me and Corey there in Oklahoma. So that's a big component that's been missing for us, and so we're excited to have that now. But this sort of structure, this many forecasters and the number of desks we have, there's always a lot of sort of manpower and brain power hanging out at WPC. And here's some of the things that we try to do, the roles that we try to play within the Weather Service. And on that first slide, you know, you saw the icons representing the other national centers. We really are, you know, sister offices to things like the Hurricane Center and Storm Prediction Center and so forth. We operate much the same way, where our role for a lot of this is to serve as the numerical weather prediction engine and adding value to the NWP before it gets to you, so you have a better starting point for your forecast. And then we house, of course, our national scale hazard outlooks. You know, where I come from in Oklahoma, the Storm Prediction Center outlooks are like the Bible. You know, everybody really pays attention. And when I got to WPC, I strove to really improve those excessive rainfall outlooks so that they would become better respected and behave a little more scientifically sound in the way we produce them. So that's been kind of a passion project of mine. But we And one of the reasons I'm here today is our role as a high-level facilitator for collaboration, working hand in hand with the regional operations centers to get down to the WFO level and sort out what needs to be sorted out on any given day. And one thing you may not realize, we get a lot of national and international media calls, CBS Radio New York, Fox Radio New York, AP, these sorts of things, particularly for winter storms, but also for flood events. So that's an area where we really can use as much information as you're able to churn out of your office to help us prepare for amplifying your message. And the list goes on as to what you'll find in our building, hosting science experiments like our flash flood experiment for about 4 weeks every summer. And we have a lot of visitors from the foreign governments, foreign modeling centers, so we try to keep up relations, kind of operation to operation. And just like I was mentioning, you know, sometimes we find ourselves as a weather service are really in the spotlight, but it really comes to a head when you have a major event with a lot of national media interest, and you start seeing WPC products here in the Oval Office, for example. So it's kind of my point, you know, the better collaborated we are, and the better we're on the same page of the words that we're using in a major event at the local, regional, and national level, then we want to make sure we're consistent in what we're doing. So I think one of the advantages to having a national center like WPC is that we work all of these sorts of events. I was able to speak directly to those offices along the Carolina coast when Florence was approaching and say, look, I lived and breathed and worked right through Harvey, and I'm having deja vu, and it's going to be as bad as you can possibly imagine. And we can say that because we work all these events because our domain is so large. So because of that sort of experience, you know, again, I think that's one of the things that we have to offer in collaboration. And there's probably lots of aspects of WPC that you're less familiar with, like, and this was something I had to spin up on when I got there in 2012, was just the immensity of the tropical program in the Weather Service. Or anybody worked along the Gulf or East Coast at any point in their career? Yeah, I got a couple. Yeah, it just, you know, the Hurricane Center and what they do, it drives everything that you're doing when you have a storm, and it affects all of our desks at WPC when we have anything tropical. And for every system that threatens land in any way in the Atlantic or the Eastern Pacific basins, WPC is in charge of the rainfall forecast. So we literally type up the hazard statement into an email and send it to NHC, and it goes directly in the public advisory. So that adds quite a bit of workload throughout the year. This picture down here is when NHC was being threatened by Hurricane Irma a couple of years ago, and so they sent some of their staff, and we flew in this guy, Bob, I can't remember his last name, from Honolulu, because he has experience working the ATCF software. And we are the official backup site for NHC. So again, a lot of workload, a lot of training that we have to do to keep current with that, because our forecasters are also capable of doing this in a pinch. It was helpful to have them at that time to keep us freed up for our CONUS mission and flash flooding, which is going on at the same time, you know, nationwide. So, but we issue, you know, summaries for tropical cyclones. We take over when they come inland and start issuing advisories until they're no longer a flood threat. So a lot of work being done there. One of the other, well, you've probably seen these charts, these national forecast charts that come out of WPC and are used pretty heavily in briefings, the NWS leadership briefing that happens every morning, and on many of your WFO websites. These, surprisingly, because it's one HMT working overnight who synthesizes everything and it puts these together, and it gets kind of QC'd by the lead forecaster. But surprisingly, that's been long running the most clicked on thing that WPC has with the analytics on our website. It's very, very popular charts, and I bring it up in a collaboration context with you all because So this flash flooding areas, the red areas here, like maybe that's an atmospheric river in the winter. That is set by our slight risk area, the excessive rainfall outlook. So there's some motivation there to want to collaborate on even the slight risk level, if it's just over chat or whatever. But if you want to have some say in what goes on in this very popular chart. The severe areas come from SPC. And the winter heavy snow areas are kind of a little bit of they start with an objective criteria from our probabilistic snow forecasts in the winter storm collaborator, if you're familiar with that. And then we look at watches and warnings, and it's a little more subjective spin at the end before we send it out. So you don't have to memorize this chart. I just want to give you a sense of how many desks we have and that there's a lot going on at any given time. When I work on an overnight shift, I probably have 7 folks working at that time. And in the day shift, it could be 8 or 9. So we have 4 blocks of desks. And one is a little more involved in analysis, and your basic weather charts are just the frontal forecasts going forward 2 or 3 days. And in that national forecast chart, we have one block of desks, 4 desks here that are the short range precip group, and they are the ones you would more likely be dealing with on a conference call, for heavy rain, heavy snow. We have our medium range group, which is almost an entirely different world, except for when we're leading up to a major event and it's seen coming 5, 6, 7 days ahead of time. Then they get more involved in the collaboration efforts. And our international group, which is not operational, but they're kind of pseudo-operational. We have 2 facilitators who are bilingual, who train visiting forecasters from Latin American and South American countries. For 4 months at a time, they'll stay in DC and learn how to do operational meteorology. This group helps us out quite a bit in the tropical duties that we have for rainfall. So it quickly covers a few of the desks. Some of the program leads at WPC helped me put these slides together, and then I'll dive more into what collaboration is in today's world in the Weather Service, kind of setting us up for that panel discussion that's coming up. But collaboration at WPC takes a lot of different forms. Just consistency between the desks, even between our medium range and short range, on the frontal forecast, and that would include with our surface analysis desk. So they're really at the beginning of it all, right? Taking in the obs every 3 hours, doing an analysis on NMAP, coordinating that analysis with the Ocean Prediction Center, who's right down the hall, and then NHC's TAF-B group, who has the tropical latitudes down here, and we stitch all that together to make the unified analysis. And there's a workshop actually coming up, kind of the first of its kind, later this year to talk about the collaboration issues we have in that process. And for farther out in time, days 3 to 7, this is a product that used to be at the Climate Prediction Center that we just absorbed into WPC over the past year, and it became operational at WPC, I think in late February or early March. And so this is it's an area of new opportunity for us, and especially as prediction gets better and better for some of these well-defined, synoptic events, that we need to start stretching things like our excessive rainfall outlook out beyond 3 days, into the medium range period. Right now, it takes the form of something like this, just a contoured area saying heavy rain possible in the southeast, but maybe we can put our same ERO kind of science to that and eventually get out to later times, prediction times. But this drives a number of hazards, and you can collaborate with the person who's designing this chart on the day shift via NWS chat. There's a special room for that, which I believe CPC was operating too. Okay, so I haven't lost anybody yet, right? We're WPC, a lot of desks, a lot going on. But the next couple of slides, I think, kind of speak to what we have to offer. Obviously, collaboration, it should be a give and take, and you're going to have your local expertise. And I started my career, the first 10 years, I was at the WFO level at Goodland and Norman. So I think I can really speak to the differences that I saw when I moved to WPC and began as an inset forecaster. And it's really that forecast funnel, right? So just the basics of meteorology. Now, I think you have to be able to get this kind of stuff right, the large scale, synoptic flow, what's your model choice of the day in a given region, if you're going to get the details of the mesoscale right. So, and I think WPC is very good at this. What I'm showing here is a spaghetti plot that includes ensemble members of the GFS system, the European, and the Canadian, all plotted on one. And the operationals are the bold or dashed lines in there. But we can look at this, we can look at trends in this kind of a graphic over 3, 4, 5 runs if we want to. And a lot of other tools like that, again, using the European ensembles especially, to get at the consensus forecast, which amazingly does really, really well most of the time, especially at those longer lead times. I think the other skill or value that we add a lot of times is that we can recognize that those really anomalous events with a little more lead time and a little more confidence than I would say I was able to do at a local level. Particularly looking at the persistence of anomalies in the PW field or in the mass flux field, whatever it might be, that these kind of things, when they persist over a given area for a 12, 24, 36-hour period, which really raises a lot of alarms for us, especially if it's coupled with a heavy QPF signal from the models. And it's translated to, I've seen multiple cases like this one from the Joaquin event in 2016, I think it was, where this is a 3-day, 72-hour forecast where we're putting record rainfall over Carolinas, and we were right about that. And so it's pretty remarkable, not just WPC, but just the way the models are today, again, on the well-defined events. I think where we struggle is more the Ellicott City, Maryland, the really small-scale basins, individual thunderstorms. That's always going to be a problem. But we provide not just the forecast, but we're trying to spin up things more like what SPC has going with their tools page. So you can now find these things that develop in the field and need a place to be hosted, like the Ensemble Situational Awareness table came out of the Western region. We now have versions of that that you can find on our website, and other things like the where we remap the WPC QPF into the average recurrence interval, or annual recurrence interval information. So I don't have a slide, again, for like the QPF program. I figure everyone's pretty well aware of that. But some of the things that excited me when I got to WPC were to get at, again, improving this excessive rainfall outlook. We made it behave a lot more similarly to the way the SPC outlooks behave, and the cadence and the look and feel. And what we found in this really dramatic time of flooding over the past 5-6 years, that we have a really good skill at picking out the major events with our high-risk category. We only use this category about 4% of the time, and yet 92% of all damages from any flooding, it could be flash flooding or whatever, all flooding damages, 92% of them occur in a high-risk contour, which is pretty amazing. The fatalities are a little more split, but still pretty large. And what I was brought to WPC to do, actually, originally, was with my convective background here from the plains. I worked the MetWatch desk, which was just a function that was spinning up at that time, and that we took from SPC to provide these, local mesoscale discussions, highly technical discussion for how we expect flash flood events to evolve over the next 3 to 6 hours. And so I'm sure you see a lot of these out here, as wet as it has been the last few years. And remember, these forecasters, everybody at WPC is on NWS chat constantly, so find us in there, and you can collaborate this kind of stuff ahead of time and just pick our brain, because the way I think about this desk, it's almost like, with your playbooks, you've got, okay, if I got severe weather event or flash flooding, I want to have a mesoanalyst, right? But maybe you're getting swamped by some hazmat incident or whatever it is that's taking resources away from you. Well, you've got a national center who has a desk that's entirely dedicated to mesoanalysis and watching for the transition into a flood event from a severe event, or giving a heads up on what the trend is in the HRRR. You know, we have really unparalleled access to the high-res models. It's remarkable what we can do on that desk. So you've got kind of a backup. If you're not able to do that at the local level, given an event for whatever the circumstances are, you know, make use of this person. Just hit them up on chat, give us a call. We're always there. And finally, I think one of the things that we do really well at NCEP, and hopefully as a weather service we'll start doing even more of, is speaking to probabilistic forecasts and taking the emphasis away so much from that deterministic single QPF or the single, you know, swath of 6 inches of snow, and spinning it to more of a, well, here's what most likely we think will happen, but it could be as much as, you know, twice as much, or you might get only 2 inches of snow. And so I know that many of the WFOs are doing that in a winter weather sense. There's been an experiment the last year or two now with more and more WFOs doing that in the rainfall sense. And again, these probabilistic distributions are derived from large model ensemble with 46 member, and that membership kind of evolves. It's sort of driven more by winter weather because the SREF was really messing up our snowfall in terms of location a lot of time. But these are really robust tools, nice to have, and the more we embrace this kind of way of framing the forecast, I think it frees us up to not have to be one-to-one, you know, in sync with each other at no national, local level on the individual rainfall or snow amounts. But if we're in the ballpark, then you can kind of use the probabilistic spread to message the event how you want to message it, you know, so long as we all agree to what those messages should be. So how much time do I have?
You still got red?
Yeah, I got a little bit.
You got about 3 minutes.
Okay, so that was kind of the first half of my talk. But I think I've spoken to collaboration quite a bit already. So now what I was going to do in the next few slides is just really hit on the collaboration aspect, and more the storytelling thing is, so when I got to WPC, it was a much different era, and that was only 7 years ago. You know, and Louis was the NCEP director at the time, and my gosh, it takes a year or two just to sort of get your feet under you at a national center like that, where suddenly I'm forecasting for Hawaii. Never thought about that before, but you know, but then Louis becomes the director of the Weather Service, and what we hear from him constantly over the last several years now is the forecasts are good enough. The FEMA's telling us that, the partners, forecasts are good. It's the consistency that is not there, and that we really need. And I think you know, many of the talks this morning spoke about relationship building, and I sense that in my time, and it's been a real struggle at WPC, and I'm sure there's been angst, you know, on the other side of phone calls at times. Think they don't have anything to tell me, you know, why am I wasting my time on this call? I think there are calls that are like that, but I think over time we've developed a rapport. We've sort of settled into like what a format is for a collaboration call with WPC, and I think I've seen the culture move at our house at WPC, and kind of and what the conversations look and feel like on the other end of the phone call on these calls. And this is a good example of having those relationships in place. There was an event, I actually did a webinar on this with Jen McNatt from the region, and from Trevor Boucher, who works at San Antonio office. And so you had, this morning I got to work, and I'd been off for a couple of days, right? And I'm looking at, oh my gosh, we're completely flooding Texas and Oklahoma the next 2 days. but we only had a slight risk in our excessive rainfall outlook, and there were no flash flood watches. And this is May. I think what's the disconnect here? And Jen at the region was thinking the exact same thing at the same time, and we got each other on the phone. And by, an hour later, this is like 10 in the morning, so really not a traditional collaboration time. An hour later, we had a call. There's perfectly seamless flash flood watches in place now after the call. And we were hearing from them, even though we didn't know when exactly the heaviest rain was going to occur, that a moderate risk would really help their messaging. So we found ways and reasons to bump it up to moderate for the day one period. We just heard that simply helped the message to their partners. And I don't think that would have happened in an hour's time, back in 2013, but it happened in 2016. But some of the difficulties, and this will be maybe some food for thought for the panel discussion, some of the difficulties we have is really defining our role at WPC. You look at NHC, they've got the official forecast track. Yeah, that's me right there. So I've got this and one more point to make. But for WPC, everything we do had been guidance, and now it's kind of a little more, I guess, forceful guidance, sort of, with the regions backing us up, and in these big events, we all have to be on the same page. But in policy, there's really nothing that says you have to follow WPC for any of this. And then we have these missing pieces to the whole forecast funnel, whereas the Storm Prediction Center's got all these components that they do, and it's not dependent on QPF, and it's not dependent on hydrology. Well, we've got to be dependent on both, and we don't have the watch component. That's in your court. So we're really there, and a lot of times as sort of, we hope, trusted advisors who have proven our worth through performance over the years. But in policy, we're not necessarily there. There are, however, a lot of efforts underway at the regional level and at headquarters, and some of that maybe Scott will speak to this afternoon. But I think we're getting there, and when we start incorporating the national blend of models as a starting point at WPC and maybe elsewhere, I feel like we've got the relationships part, and now it's just a matter of format. So, stop there.
All right, let's give Joey, I need to bring the table up, please? Okay, so we talked about the panel, collaboration panel. Let me